You're watching Digital Photography One-on-One, where we answer your questions. Here's your host, Mark Wallace.
Welcome back to another episode of Digital Photography One-on-One. In this episode, we're going to talk about the question that is asked more than any other question. It also happens to be my least favorite question. So let's dive right in. First, the question. Razik Khan asks, what type of lighting equipment would you recommend for me? I need to know what kind of strobe, how powerful it should be, if I should get any umbrellas, and if I should get any reflectors or not. Now, I don't mean to pick on Razik. He's just asking the same question hundreds of other people have asked. And that is, what should I buy? Well, there's an old proverb that says, give a man a fish and you fed him for today. Teach a man to fish and you fed him for a lifetime. Now, there are two reasons I have a difficult time answering the question, what should I buy? The first is that you're asking me for a fish, and I'd really rather teach you how to fish. And the second reason is because it all depends. I mean, imagine if somebody came up to you and said, hey, what kind of car should I buy? Well, it depends on what they wanted to do with their car. If they're hauling lumber, they probably want a truck. But if they were hauling kids, they'd probably want a minivan. Or maybe one of those big Suburbans. Or even a VW bus. Anyway, there's lots of different answers to that question. And even if somebody came up to you and said, hey, what kind of minivan should I buy? You'd still have a bunch of options. And there's Dodge and Ford and Volvo and Chrysler and Volkswagen and Pontiac. And the truth is, they probably all do the job. It comes down to personal preference or budget or maybe the closest dealership. Now, all of these things are true with photography equipment and studio lighting equipment as well. So to help you answer the question, what should I buy? Let me teach you how to fish. I'm going to dedicate 3 one-on-one episodes to this question. In this episode, we'll begin by learning about some basic principles of light. In the next episode, we're going to look at some lighting equipment and do some comparisons. And then in the final episode, we're going to look at a basic 3-light setup to sort of put it all together. So let's get started. There are lots of words that photographers use to describe light. Let's start by talking about 2 of the most common terms in studio lighting, hard light and soft light. The best way to tell if light is hard or soft is by looking at the shadows it casts. Hard light casts a very clearly defined shadow. Its edges are hard. Soft light casts a shadow that's hard to tell where it starts and stops. Its edges are soft. On a day where the sky is clear, the sun will throw a concentrated beam of light that will produce deep, sharp shadows on the subject. This is hard light. But if the clouds come out, then the light becomes diffused. Instead of the light traveling in the same direction, it is cast in different directions, and the source of the light becomes much larger. A larger light source will throw a wider beam of light with shadows that are more open because light is bouncing around and spilling into the shadows. This is soft light. An important term is effective size. The effective size of a light is based both on the physical size of the light and its position in relation to the subject. In other words, the closer a light is to the subject, the larger its effective size and the softer the light will be. The farther away a light is from the subject, the smaller the effective size and the harder the light will be. To illustrate this point, let's look at the sun. Although the sun is 100 times the width of the Earth, it looks like a tiny speck in the sky. That's because it's 93 million miles from the Earth. This makes the sun's effective size very small, and therefore it gives off very hard light. Now, if we were able to move the sun very close to the Earth, its effective size would be much larger, and the light it casts would be much softer. We can change the quality of light by changing the effective size of our light source. Since moving the sun closer to the Earth would be impossible, and a really bad idea, there is another way to modify our light source. We can use modifiers. Now let's bring back the clouds. In this scenario, the sun would be the light source, and the clouds would be a light modifier. The sun lights up the clouds, and the clouds become a huge light over the Earth. Now our illumination is the entire sky, not just the tiny dot of the sun. The effective size of the light is much larger, and the light is much softer. Sometimes, soft light is called diffused light, and hard light is called harsh light. Contrast is the difference between the darkest and lightest areas in an image. The greater the difference, the higher the contrast. In much the same way, you can change how hard or soft a light is by moving a light closer or farther from the subject. You can also change the contrast of your image by changing the position of the light. When you position the light in front of your subject, you'll get a low contrast lighting. If you move your light to the side of the subject, you'll get a much higher contrast lighting. Now those are just some very, very basic principles of lighting. I mean, the very tip of the top of the iceberg. For more information about lighting, check out a couple books. Lighting for Portrait Photography by Stephen Babister and Master Lighting Guide for Portrait Photographers by Christopher Gray. Also check out a couple of cool websites, studiolighting.net and strobus.blogspot.com. And we also go into a lot of detail about light and color in our workshops. Our Studio Lighting 101 workshop is perfect for beginners. And the next episode, I'm going to show you how to take these principles and relate them directly to different types of studio lighting equipment. And then you'll be well on your way to knowing what to buy. I'll see you next time.
This episode is brought to you by SnapFactory.com and StudioLighting.net. For more information about our workshops, visit SnapFactory.com.